Well, it's a nice morning here in Goodyear. I think we're finally over the heat of the summer. These Arizona summers can be tough. About 3 months out the year. I was warned about it before I moved out here. But golly, once they're over, you got some spectacular weather. You got some good times. And I'm ready for it because it wasn't as hot as it was last year. Last year we were like running about 117 through the weeks. This year it was more like 105 and stuff like that. More tolerable. I mean, it got to the point we're living out here where if it's 80 degrees, you feel like a slight chill. Well, I'm sitting out here in my sweatshirt and I think it's about 70, 75. I just walked the dog around the lake. I was gonna make this video there, but it was too breezy. So decided to come home, give it a shot. Hopefully with my shotgun microphone, you won't get too much wind. But I wanna talk specifically to black folks today. Now everybody's invited to listen because anybody to watch it can see it. But I want to talk to a lot of black folks and mostly black Democrats. And I got a question. When are you going to overcome? You know, we used to sing that song in the 60s about we shall overcome. And a lot of folks are still singing it. My question is, when are you going to overcome? Because I know too many black folks are living life through a rearview mirror. Now, think about it. Can you drive up and down the street looking through your rearview mirror? I mean, you're not going to get very far. Black people tend to have been trained to look at life through a rearview mirror. Constantly talking about slavery and Jim Crow and oppression and the white man's holding me back and all this stuff. And it's like the older I get, the more I realize it's not about overcoming. It's about living life talking about overcoming. I overcame a long time ago. So my question is, when are you going to overcome? Now, overcoming doesn't mean being rich, having a lot of money, having a whole lot of people that love you. Hell, LeBron James, and they talk, this guy got more money than most folks can dream of, white, black, or polka dot. But he hasn't overcame. He's sitting over here talking about the white man or the police hunting down black folks. He's sitting over here talking about racism, worrying about how white people think all the time. I think he's more worried about how the Chinese think, though. They affect his pocket. Overcoming is realizing who you are and not giving a rip what anybody thinks about who you are. Just doing the best that you can for yourself and your family, living a decent life, and going about your business. I mean, people talk about their boss don't like them. Hell, I had a lot of bosses that didn't like me. I didn't care. The fact of it was, they respected me because I made them money. And I stayed at the job because they paid me money. I had this one boss where people said, oh, well, he's a racist. And after being around the guy for a while, I came to the realization, I said, he's not a racist, he hates everybody. He don't care what color you are. That was just his nature. But I learned more from that man than anybody else I ever worked for. And some of the things that I learned from him, I still apply today. So no, he wasn't a racist. That was just his personality. But even if he was a racist, as long as he respected me, as long as he paid me on time, I didn't care. I didn't go home and go to bed with him at night. This nonsense about worrying about whether somebody likes you. It ain't about whether somebody likes you. Do they respect you? Do you respect them? And in your sphere of influence, the people that you live around or you associate with, those are the only people you should care about liking you. But as long as people are hung up with worrying about, well, these people are holding me back. No, the only person that's holding you back is you. I remember a preacher once said, the world owes you nothing. And it doesn't. And God doesn't owe you anything. He's given you everything. If you have faith in Him and you trust in Him, you can overcome anything. But see, many black folks have become dependent on the Democratic Party. I was one of them. I was raised in the welfare state. I understand how the Johnson War on Poverty actually was designed to keep people impoverished. And it kept me impoverished as long as I was a kid. And see, I can't blame everything on Johnson. I can't blame everything on the Democrats. If my father would have did the job that he was supposed to do, then he wouldn't have to worry about being dependent on the Democrats or anybody. But he didn't. I was unfortunate. I had one of those fathers that didn't take care of his family. Now, I loved my father. I still do. And I didn't harbor all that stuff against him or make me bitter and hateful once I grew up. But what it taught me was to do the best that I could for my kids. Whatever my kids got, I was always there. Whatever they didn't get, I was always there. I worked every day. I put in my time. I took care of my family. I sacrificed when I had to. And I didn't tell them what was going on. That wasn't their business. I didn't make them worry about if I got along with my boss. I didn't have to worry about bills that need to be paid or how their mother and I were going to take care of stuff. That wasn't their responsibility. Their responsibility was to go to school, to get educated, to prepare themselves to take care of their family when their time came. So whatever I had to endure, or my wife and I had to endure, we endured for them. That was our responsibility. And my responsibility as the head of the house was to endure for all of them, no matter what it took. Not sit around complaining about what can't happen and what could happen. I made things happen because I trusted in God and I moved on. I didn't look through life through a rearview mirror. Now I know folks right now today that are still looking through life in a rearview mirror. So I was wondering about this concept of looking through life in a rearview mirror, and I was thinking about other cultures, other ethnicities, and how did they deal with stuff. So when I grew up, the neighborhood or the community that I grew up in, Pasadena, was very diverse at that time. I mean, I went to a school, Washington Elementary, but we had everybody. We had Asians, we had Hispanics, we had blacks, we had whites, and we had different segments of Asian. We had Chinese, we had Japanese Americans, we had Filipino, we had, I don't know if they're considered Asian or Hispanic, so don't get me all twisted up in that. It's here nor there. We had all kinds of groups of people, and we all got along. We were children, but we got along. It wasn't a race thing. Today, right now, in my 60s, living in Arizona, I live in a diverse community. All kinds of people. And we get along. We have a common goal to live our life peacefully. People drive up and down the street I never met. How you doing? I'd ride up, how you doing? People walk their dogs, how you doing? I don't even know half these folks. Black, white, polka dot. But we get along because we respect each other. We're not living life in a rearview mirror. But since so many black folks are hung up on this thing, so many black folks are hung up on slavery and Jim Crow, I wanted to know how other folks dealt with it. And I remember as a child watching the classroom, and I was one of these kids. Like I said, my father wasn't there, so education wasn't pressed on me. Getting ahead academically wasn't pressed in my household. It was just, matter of fact, it was just getting by. Many times it was just waiting from the 15th or the 1st when the welfare check came, just to get more food. And in class, some of us would clown. I was one of those. But I noticed most of my Asian friends didn't clown. I noticed that for whatever reason, they knuckled down, they were taking care of business, they were studying hard. And there was something else about when I was a kid at that time. Most of the landscapers, the people that took care of yards that I remember were Asian. I mean, it was like all of them that I could think of were Asian. And the kids that I went to school with, like I said, they were studying hard. Now here's what's interesting. I didn't know this at the time, particularly when it comes to the Japanese American that I grew up with. Those kids, their parents, and we grew up in Southern California, many of them, their parents were taken away during World War II. When the Democrats and FDR locked up all the Japanese Americans, all of them. And I think many of them lost property, many of them lost their livelihoods, many of them lost everything. They were put in concentration camps, well, whatever you want to call them. They were in concentration camps as in Nazi Germany, but they couldn't go anywhere. They lost their citizenship. I'm talking about people that were born in the United States just because of the color of their skin, because they were of Japanese ancestry. And the thought was that these Japanese ancestry people might be more loyal to Japan than the United States of America. So they were locked up. Now, none of my Japanese American friends ever talked about that to me, ever. Matter of fact, I only got one or two to even come close to telling me about it as an adult. Because it was painful. It was a painful experience. And they didn't want to deal with the pain. I'm going to tell you how painful this stuff is. I have friends that I worked with that are Chinese American. Chinese American that will not buy Japanese cars because their parents told them do not buy Japanese cars because of Japanese invading Manchuria and the rape and all the murders and all that crap. These are American citizens. They ain't got nothing to do with what happened in World War II or in Manchuria and Japan. None of that stuff. But yet they had to live with the mess that their parents had to deal with. And so they were told, don't buy that. Now some of them may still not buy Japanese cars. I don't know. I haven't asked them recently. But the one thing I do realize or remember or know, all of those folks that I talked about, or the majority of them, are successful. Because whatever their parents had to go through, they prepared them to study, to move ahead, not to look at life through a rearview mirror, but to look forward. So many of them became doctors, lawyers, pharmacists, all kinds of professional stuff. Whether they were of Japanese ancestry or the Chinese ancestry. And that brings in another point. Every ethnic group, I'm talking about white folks too, every last one throughout history have been hosed at one time or another. All of us. Black Americans are not the sole source of slavery. We're not the only ones that had to go through that stuff. Every last one of them did. Every last group of people. But we, for some reason, want to hold on to this thing like some kind of sick badge of honor. Therefore, we're constantly living life in a rearview mirror, thinking about how our ancestors were oppressed instead of focusing on how we're going to make the future better for our children and our grandchildren. And to make things worse, we're holding on to this legacy by holding on to the very political party, that was responsible for it. And that was the Democrat Party. They were the party that were responsible for slavery. They were the party that was responsible for Jim Crow. They were the party that was responsible for Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal, and all the mess that came along with it. And they are the party of LBJ and the Great Society, which pretty much eviscerated the black family. You know, Patrick Moynihan, a Democrat, warned in 1965 with his report that the black family was subject to almost genocide, the destruction of the family, because 25%, he said at that time, of the children who were born in black families were born to families with only one parent. Now think about that. So we go back to Jim Crow, we go back into the 50s, and that means over 80% of black families were intact, mother and father. During the harsh times of Reconstruction, all the way through the 50s, through Jim Crow, the black family was intact. Now, when Patrick Moynihan came out with his report, he was eviscerated by white folks and black folks alike. Well, let's fast forward to 2021. Now they're talking about 72% of black children are born to a single parent. Patrick Moynihan knew exactly what he was talking about. But there are powers that be that always wanted to happen what happened. And there were always gatekeepers, black gatekeepers, that would help perpetuate this thing, to help keep it going. And one of the ways to keep it going, the destruction of the black family, is to have black folks living life in a rearview mirror, constantly talking about how we're being persecuted. Now we got critical race theory, where they want to talk about how America was created in 1619, where the United States of America was created in 1776. And whatever happened prior to that was not the beginning of this nation. But I'm not going to get into that mess here other than to say this. It is a continuation of the same rear view mirror mentality that want to keep black people looking like they're being oppressed. And if you ever notice something, the folks that are always talking about black people being oppressed are the same folks that always talk about helping us become unoppressed. And wasn't it Charles Barkley that said about 10 years ago or so, black folks have been following Democrats for 50 years and they're still poor? Well, these are the Democrats. If you don't, you need to understand the psychology here. You know, if they got you sucking on the gigantic government mammary gland and they're telling you that this is going to set you free, you're never going to be free. Never. So these folks are sitting around talking about how black folks are being oppressed, how critical race theory, white people are evil, and how we need to do better. And what do? What are they doing to make it better? What is Joe doing to make it better? Inflation's through the roof. Poor could afford gas before Joe took over. Now the poor can't afford, they can't even afford meat. So Joe has made food stamps higher than there ever was before. They'll be wanting to dole out more benefits. And on top of that, he's bringing in more illegals to compete with the poor folks that's already here, black, white, or whatever color. But as long as he got black folks living life, looking through the rearview mirror, you don't have to worry about them. I mean, he's so bold, the Democrats are so bold that he can say, if you don't know the difference between me and Trump, you ain't black. Let me redefine that. If you don't know the difference between somebody that never took a dime of the government money when he was president and made the highest employment in the history of this country and the economy and made us energy dependent and made it so there were more jobs available than folks can work and made it so everybody was making money, but the media and all the rhinos and all the Democrats and all the folks that's been in Washington forever, the special interest lobbies, they hated that, versus this guy that's sitting over here telling you that he's for you and he's been cutting your legs off from the moment he took over power. So yeah, there's a big difference between Trump and Biden. Biden, the guy that sit over there and called his black representative a boy. Biden, who when he was a younger man, said he didn't want his children growing up in a racial jungle. Biden here doing this when he was campaigning for president, had a bunch of black kids sitting around him talking about he had to learn about roaches, as if to say that roaches correlates with black people. As long as black folks look through life through a rearview mirror and they can't see that Ku Klux Klan, Jim Crow, and all that stuff was the Democrat Party, they're never going to get ahead. They're never going to overcome. It's time to overcome if you haven't already. And you can overcome by learning how to think for yourself, how to research. Quiet. You hear me over here making a video. Stop it. Rexy, I just took her for a walk. Somebody must be walking their dog out front. Anyway, stop it. Anyway, you're never going to overcome doing the same thing over and over again, believing the same lies over and over again, not willing to step out on faith. Hell, you remember when Trump was running for president? He went around a bunch of black folks. I think it was in Detroit, I'm not sure. He said, what the hell do you got to lose? And people said, his advisors before he said that said, oh no, you shouldn't say that. But he said, no, I'm saying. And he was right. And now you know what you got to lose. Matter of fact, let me phrase, now you know what you lost. You lost money out your pocket. You lost freedom. This sucker wants you to take those of us that decided we didn't want to take the thing, and I call it the thing because every time I write down one of the proper words or even ad-libs, I get all these stupid signs, warnings from big tech, you know. But those of us that don't want to do that stuff, you know, now they're trying to force it on you. Now I'm gonna tell you something. I'm an honest guy. If Biden was president when they were trying to make that vaccine, just like Trump was president, I wouldn't have blamed him for what they were doing, just like I didn't blame Trump for what they were doing. But once this thing came out, and once I started seeing what's going on, hey, I'm not doing it. You do it, that's your business. It's up to you. And that's the whole point. People should be able to have the choice to do it. And Trump wasn't trying to make folks do it. He was giving you the choice to do it. But now, Biden wants to act like he's master or king. And he wants to make it so everybody got to do it. I hear over 70% of the black folks in New York City haven't done it. What they gonna do? Probably over 70% of them voted for Biden and the Democrats. See, the Democrats think that black folks are supposed to just obey, do what you're told to do. And then when I tell this to different black folks, they get angry at me. But when I show them examples, Biden can call you anything he wants. He can say, like I said, he called that guy boy. He can tell you you ain't black. He can say whatever he wants, and they won't say anything because they haven't overcome. They are still in slavery. They are still too beholden to the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party's master. I don't have a master. The Republican Party's not my master. Oh, I stand corrected. I do have a master. and his name is Jesus Christ. That's the only master I have. The Republican Party is not my master. Trump is not my master. And black folks that are free, we can think for ourselves. That's why I said I wouldn't have blamed Biden for those vaccines like I don't blame Trump. But I'm not taking it. Now, for those folks who want to take it, that's their business. Go for it. But I think that you need to be a free thinker. You need to be able to overcome mentally and to move forward and take care of your own life and do what's best for your family. So getting back to black folks, I'm telling you, I don't even want folks to even just necessarily believe what I say. Do research. You can see the stuff that I'm telling you is true. And if I'm wrong, tell me or show me the evidence so I can correct it on the next video. But stop living life through a rearview mirror. It's like living life it's like running on a treadmill. You're not going anywhere. Do you want your children in the next 50 years to still be sitting around talking about, well, the white man's holding me back? Well, it didn't hold back my Chinese American friends. It didn't hold back my Japanese American friends. Right now, I see the majority of the landscapers I see are Hispanic. Right now. Just like when I was a kid, the majority I saw was Asians. And what are their kids doing? I bet their kids are out there studying, trying to get ahead. Not sitting around talking about, oh, well, the white man's holding me back. Or even this other stupid ideology about, well, you're studying hard, you acting like you white. It's the stupidest thing in the world. You need to get ahead. You need to prepare to get ahead. Don't let nobody hold you back. Don't let stupidity hold you back. Don't let dumb folks hold you back. Don't let Democrats and that big, gigantic government mammary gland hold you back. Wean yourself off that thing. Think for yourself. Move forward. Only look at the rear view mirror when you're backing up to get in a parking space. Look straight ahead to get where you're going. I'm always looking ahead. This is Sam Tolley.